Greetings, mighty Africans. This is the Makonnen Tendaji Show. I am your host, Makonnen Tendaji. It is an honor to teach African people, a responsibility I do not take for granted, a responsibility to which I have dedicated my life. The Makonnen Tendaji Show aims to analyze the material realities of Black people by engaging historical and contemporary evidence, investigating ideologies and systems, and disrupting our dehumanization. We will study, analyze, examine, and discuss the history, conditions, and actions of our people, the only way, the true way, the African way, together. In 30 minutes or less, it is our intention to critically teach the rich and radical history of our people, our way, the African way. Today, the 24th of January, 2021, our show's topic, Humble with Our People, Intolerant Against Our Enemies, asserts that multi-partiality, humility, and patience must become values we intentionally practice when we engage our people on political topics. And the reason why we have chosen this topic of ours, as you know, on the Makonnen Tendaji Show, we do everything with intention. And our intention tonight is to be clear about what our objectives, our goals, our tactics are when we are discussing and debating and dialoguing things that concern the masses of our people, the mass interests of our people. And this phrase, humble with our people, intolerant against our enemies, actually comes from one of our mighty ancestors, Kwame Ture. One of his essays entitled, let me pull it up right here, entitled Pan-Africanism, Land and Power. And this is actually printed in the textbook, Modern Black Nationalism, from Marcus Garvey to Louis Farrakhan. And this is absolutely one of the most comprehensive and expansive texts on Black nationalism. It contains speeches, interviews, chapters, among a variety of other sources and types of sources. And so in this speech, in this essay that Kwame Ture writes, there is a statement that is very, very profound, and we need to be sure that we not only hold on to it in our regular work and in our daily discussion, but one that we effectively teach to our people, and we don't lose sight of ourselves. So I'm going to read the quote, and then I'll actually discuss the full essay a bit later on. So the quote that I'm going to read says, "The impression of Pan-Africanism especially is that one must be aggressive and intolerant against the enemy, but with one's people, one must always be humble. If one says one is really serving the people, one must be humble. You are always humble to him whom you serve." So that's where we get our title of tonight's show from, that essay written by Kwame Ture entitled Pan-Africanism, Land and Power. So, and which we will be analyzing further in a bit. And before we get to that, we want to bring up the first scholar's fundamental, or the first of the list of a scholar's fundamentals, and that's cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is one of the most important and overlooked concepts that we need to stop overlooking and effectively work to incorporate into our daily dialogue, into our organizing work, just into our study, all the above. And so let me just teach on cognitive dissonance theory, and then by doing so, that the importance of it will be made apparent. So the theory derives from Leon Festinger's cognitive dissonance theory in 1957, which suggests that we have an inner drive to hold all our attitudes and behavior in harmony and avoid disharmony or dissonance. This is known as the principle of cognitive cognitive consistency. And then how we can interpret this theory is if we think about how we are made up as individual people. We have our beliefs, we have our constant thoughts about ourselves, about our peers, about our loved ones, about the world around us. All of these things, all of these factors and ingredients all mix up together, and they establish this narrative, this internal narrative that we as human beings do everything we can to maintain a consistency of. Without a consistency of that internal narrative, there is no way that we as humans can establish ourselves, can adapt to our surroundings, so on and so forth. And so what happens when cognitive dissonance becomes a factor, when one learns new information that challenges a part of that internal narrative, when we learn a new fact about something that we hold near and dear to us, that challenges it or goes against it, we fall into this state of cognitive dissonance. And then what we will do is we will employ different defense mechanisms and coping mechanisms in order to restore or attempt to restore our cognitive consonance, our cognitive consistency. And the response to this dissonance ranges from ignoring the new information entirely, disputing the information's legitimacy. On a more constructive side, a response to the dissonance is to receive the new information, the legitimate factual information, the evidence, and then go about changing the belief or the behavior or the attitude in order to eliminate the dissonance and to reestablish cognitive consonance, now with a newly formed belief or an adjusted behavior. So, for example, let's say I have been smoking cigarettes for 30 years now, and there's nothing wrong with me. I'm healthy as can be. That is a part of my internal narrative, my cognitive consonance. 30 years, I'm doing the same thing. There's no challenging information or evidence. But let's say in my 31st year of smoking cigarettes, someone presents this scientific medical report that actually proves the dangers to health that smoking cigarettes poses. This new information is a direct challenge to my cognitive consonance, to my internal narrative. So now I'm experiencing cognitive dissonance. I'm conflicted. This information is butting heads with my internal narrative of my understanding of the world, of my understanding of myself. So I'm going to employ whatever mechanism I can to restore that consonance, that consistency, that narrative. I can respond, I can react by ignoring the information. You don't know what you're talking about. I can respond by disputing the legitimacy of the information. Oh, what doctors published that report? What medical school did that come from? I don't know them. I don't trust them. I can project my anger onto the person delivering the information because they have thrown me into this state of dissonance. And so now I am my internal narrative is threatened. So now I project anger and I say, get away from me, you buffoon. Those are all reactions and responses to cognitive dissonance. It's important that we understand this concept when it comes to teaching our people, when it comes to serving and organizing our people, when we may have information or we may have potentially conflicting beliefs. When that cognitive consonance it starts to feel disrupted or threatened, those mechanisms will be employed. We need to be sure we have the proper solutions to those responses. So again, that was just to bring up that fundamental, because it's, as I said, very, very important. And now I would like to read another powerful and profound quote from another ancestor, Huey P. Newton. And this is of equal importance to the excerpt from Kwame Ture's essay. It is in line with our message on the show. So Huey P. Newton once said, "I dissuade party members from putting down people who do not understand. Even people who are unenlightened and seemingly bourgeois should be answered in a polite way. Things should be explained to them as fully as possible. I was turned off by a person who did not want to talk to me because I was not important enough. Maurice just wanted to preach to the converted who already agreed with him. I try to be cordial because that way you win people over. You cannot win them over by drawing the line of demarcation, saying you are on this side and I am on the other. That shows a lack of consciousness. After the Black Panther Party was formed, I nearly fell into this error. I could not understand why people were blind to what I saw so clearly. Then I realized that their understanding had to be developed." What makes this excerpt so profound? From reading this, if we could think to ourselves, what is Huey P. Newton teaching us? What kinds of ideas and new ways of engaging our people is he trying to put forth? This notion of being humble with our people and intolerance against our enemies is made quite apparent in this statement. When he says, I try to be cordial with people because that's how you win them over. You cannot win them over by drawing the line of demarcation. One of the most prominent factors of online and social media discourse today there are lines of demarcation everywhere. Everyone belongs to a silo. Everyone subscribes to a particular badge that is exclusive and it's territorial. Social media as a whole is extremely territorial. You either get with the program and stick to it, or you sort of remain adrift and you just kind of float. Lines of demarcation among our own people is one of the most prominent forms of division in our efforts, in our struggle. To say, oh, I subscribe to this ideology and you don't, get out, is one of the most anti-African, anti-Black things we can do to ourselves. Oh, you voted for the Republican governor. Off with your head. It's counterproductive. It's counterintuitive. It's doing the enemy's work. And as he says, right, it actually shows a lack of consciousness. So someone could be the most learned and well-studied scholar. If they draw these lines of demarcation and they work in these silos, they're actually highly, highly unconscious and are working against, actively working against, collectively building critical consciousness for our people. This is one of the most important teachings I've ever read, and I keep it tucked for myself first and foremost. And then I share it with my peers and whatnot, because it's important. So again, to be humble with our people and intolerant against our enemies, what are we asking ourselves to do? We are putting forth the objective, the intention, the goal. Our people first. Then us as individuals, then us as our own singular interests, our individual understandings of the world around us. Our people first. If our responsibility is to educate our people, that has to come first. It doesn't have to be packaged in a particular ideological vessel. It does not have to be dressed up as the truth and everything else is conspiracy, heresy. As long as the truth is being taught to our people, the responsibility is being fulfilled. So now, if we were to turn our attention to Kwame Ture's essay, Pan-Africanism in Land and Power, I'll read the excerpt that I read in the beginning again. The impression of Pan-Africanism especially is that one must be aggressive and intolerant against the enemy, but with one's people, one must always be humble. If one says one is really serving the people, one must be humble. You are always humble to him whom you serve. When we think about what a cohesive force is and what an organized body is, not an individual body, but a body of people, of lives, we must understand that cohesion is not possible without the established understanding that we are all learning. We all accept our people, first and foremost, because they are our people, and that same body works to eliminate and keep out all instances of demarcation, all instances of exclusivity. Oh, this is our org. We understand these values and these beliefs, and if you don't rock with that, we're not really cool with you. Oh, we wear these letters or these colors. That's our organization. If the organization is not organizing the masses, it is not an organization at all. So now let's shift to another speech from Stokely Speaks, Kwame Ture, later known as, in a speech entitled Pan-Africanism. And there was a speech given April 1970 at Morehouse College. And I'm going to read just some excerpts from Ancestor Toure's speech. And he was one of our most gifted orators for many reasons. And some of those reasons will become apparent in as I read the excerpts right now. So he says, he's speaking about some personal attacks he had endured, not physical attacks, but verbal and in public spaces. Condemnations is a better word. He says, I don't want to attack any personalities because I have never done that. And I learned that from Dr. Martin Luther King. I've never attacked any Black man, even though I've been attacked by almost all of them, the ones on the right and the ones who are supposed to be revolutionary. Dr. King never attacked any Black man, and that's why I had a great deal of respect and admiration for him, because he cared about his people and he always sought to unify us rather than to divide us. But I must speak to some of the criticisms because I think it's necessary for us to clear up our minds. A lot of the criticisms have not been on a political level, but on a personal level. That means my critics are incapable of dealing with my political ideology and must therefore attack me personally. That shows the very weakness of their political position. Stokely Carmichael isn't Stokely Carmichael because he's Stokely Carmichael. He's Stokely Carmichael because of the political ideology he expresses. And that's why people listen to him and pay attention to him. So if you were attacking Stokely Carmichael, you must attack the political ideology that he expresses, not Stokely Carmichael, the person. When you begin to attack the person, you admit you are incapable of attacking their political ideology. Remember the definition and the implications behind cognitive dissonance. One of the mechanisms, the responses to it, projecting anger, disputing the information, projecting that anger at the messenger of the information. When we are teaching our people, the goal should not be to get a rise out of them. Oh, if it ain't scaring you, it ain't the truth. It's such an erroneous idea. If it doesn't scare you, it's not going to change you. Those are vain attempts to capture the power of truth and the driving force that we can harness from teaching and exchanging the truth. What Kwame Ture is speaking about here in terms of political attacks being personal, this is a good idea for us to keep in mind when we engage our people online, social media discourse, or in person in real life. If we are attempting at exchanging information with somebody and they disagree but can't quite articulate why outside of insulting you, that's an indication of their inability to actually constructively challenge the actual information. So in the spirit of Kwame Ture, I'm Makonnen Tendaji, not because I'm Makonnen Tendaji, but I am Makonnen Tendaji because of my particular set of political beliefs and ideologies and worldviews. And if there are any challenges to me, the challenges must be to those, not to my glasses or my how my beard doesn't quite connect right here. The only way we can truly work to establish and sustain that cohesive force is for us to understand what it means to humble ourselves and who we should be intolerant against. Kwame Ture goes on, I will attack political concepts that I think are damaging our people, and when I do that, I will give my affirmative political concept. Listen to this. In our community today, we have people who have no program other than attacking other people's programs. That's not the way you build revolution. I'll read again. I will attack political concepts that I think are damaging our people. And when I do that, I will give my affirmative political concept. In our community today, we have people who have no program other than attacking other people's programs. That's not the way you build revolution. For those of us who may be just looking into joining an organization or are just starting to study but don't quite know where to start or have a particular support system, always be mindful of looking for support and guidance from the person or the group that seems to have a large capacity to direct insult and attack to another individual or another organization, not to their politics or their ideology, but to them. Be mindful of that, because as Kwame Ture says here, that's an indicator of an inability to constructively and critically challenge. That's an inability to actually exchange information. He goes on this notion of a cohesive force. This is important. If one does not have an ideology, one can have no discipline. In order for the Black community to come together, we must find a common ideology. It is in seeking to find this common ideology that I come before you tonight. An ideology is merely a cohesive force, a set of principles, a set of beliefs that tell us where we're going, what our goals are, and what we hope to achieve. The problem in the Black community today is that there are always arguments over tactics because there is no ideology. So you have people who are arguing about how to go, but they don't know where they are going. That's why we find so much confusion about Black student unions and Black college campus groups. They are arguing about tactics. And this comes from the speech that he gave at Morehouse College. You have people who are arguing about how to get there, but none of them know where there is or what there is. It's just, we know we have to move. So we should move this way. No, we should move that way. Where are we going? That's humbling ourselves. Let's put our need for our tactics to be utilized down. And let's pick up the intentionality that we must practice and sustain in terms of setting our sights on where we are going, what we are aiming for. So those two particular sources are the primary means of discussing this notion of humble with our people and tolerance against our enemies. The reason why I chose this particular topic is as a result of seeing the confusion and the hysteria around the presidential inauguration of Joe Biden to the presidency and Kamala Harris to the vice presidency. All day on the 20th, the different silos, the different enclaves are shouting, insulting, attacking. This is so dumb. This is ridiculous. The other side, wow, this is so great. Anyone who doesn't like this is a bad person. Going back and forth, going back and forth, going back and forth. Arguing about tactics, not focusing on where we are going. Arguing about which tools we want to use to move, but don't know where we're moving, or even how we're going to move, who we're trying to move, against what. This notion of being humble with our people and intolerant against our enemies cannot be understated or underemphasized. It actually needs to be centered. So in conclusion, this is, or there will be a second part to this particular topic next week, part 2. And in that part 2, I'm actually going to be discussing a bit more of a, I don't want to say academic, but a more research-based body of work. And it's actually on political psychology. This is a very new field, and it's a multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary, I should say, field. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read a couple of small things to kind of, prime the discussion for next week, or what the discussion will be next week. Political psychology is the field of inquiry at the intersection of political science and psychology. And then if I read this, the cognitive research that explains how narratives are assembled includes studies that focus on the representativeness, availability, and framing of information. We incorporate information that forms a narrative, which we assess by judgment of representativeness, the clinical equivalent of goodness of fit testing. When we assemble information, we do not use all that we know at one time. We incorporate information that fits our point of view, our frame, and we incorporate information that we have used recently, that is available information. Political psychology is a critical look into the very emotionally charged ways that we go about processing information and then making decisions based on the information we just processed. So that's part 2 next week. So tune in for that, tune into that. And with that being said, I am Makonnen Tendaji. This is the Makonnen Tendaji Show, where we engage historical and contemporary evidence, investigate ideologies and systems, and disrupt the dehumanization of all African people the African way together. This is a contribution to our global liberation struggle. May the ancestors be assured. May the Most High be pleased. Africa will be free.